So, I want you, the listener, to imagine for just a second that you are the CEO of a Fortune 500 manufacturing company.
Okay, right. High stress, big decision.
Yeah, exactly. High stakes. And it's, let's say it's 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon and your phone rings.
Never a good sign at 2 on a Tuesday.
Right. So it's your plant manager, your primary production line in a mid-sized facility somewhere outside of Dayton, Ohio, has just suffered this catastrophic mechanical failure.
Oh, wow. So everything grinds to a halt.
Everything. And every single hour that this specific assembly line sits idle, it's costing your company, let's say, $200,000.
Just in delayed shipments and ruined inventory and all that.
Exactly. 200 grand an hour. But here's the kicker. The only engineer on the planet who is certified to, diagnose and reboot this proprietary system is currently sitting at your corporate headquarters in Munich, Germany.
Oh, man. So she's an ocean away.
Right. So you look at the commercial airline schedules. To get her from Munich to Dayton, she has to fly to London Heathrow, lay over for maybe 4 hours.
Assuming there are no delays.
Right, assuming perfect weather. Then she flies to Chicago O'Hare, lays over for another 3 hours, and then catches this tiny regional flight to Dayton.
Yeah, that's a nightmare. She might get there by, what, Thursday morning?
If she's lucky, and by the time she actually touches the factory floor, the factory has bled over $8 million.
$8 million. Wow.
Yeah. So the question here isn't, how much a plane ticket costs. The question is, how much capital are you willing to deploy right now to buy back tomorrow morning?
When you frame the scenario exactly like that, a $100,000 charter flight suddenly doesn't look like a luxury expense at all.
No, not at all.
I mean, it looks like the most rational, cost-effective emergency triage you could possibly do. It's just an operational necessity.
And that scenario, that exact calculation, is the threshold we are crossing today. We're doing a deep dive into something really fascinating.
Yeah, we have a massive stack of source material on the desk today.
We really do. We've got industry data, certification trackers, supply chain reports. But, we aren't going to talk about any of it in the traditional aviation sense.
Right, no aviation geek stuff today.
Exactly. We are completely ignoring the engineering of thrust-to-weight ratios or like the aesthetics of customized leather interiors. We don't care about that.
No, we are using these sources to map out something that's entirely invisible. We're looking at the time economy.
The time economy, I love that term.
It really is the perfect framework because if you step back and, analyze the behavior of the ultra-wealthy, the mega corporations, and the mobility tech sector, you realize something pretty profound.
What's that?
That at the absolute pinnacle of the financial food chain, the currency just stops being dollars. The currency literally becomes minutes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, minutes. So to map this out, we are drawing from a very specific set of intelligence today. We have the 2025 Reader's Choice Survey from Business Jet Traveler.
Which is just a goldmine of psychological and behavioral data.
It really is. It's from people actually living this lifestyle. We also have the National Business Aviation Association's newly released fact book.
Yeah, lots of hard data in there.
We're tracking real-time regulatory movements for electric air taxis, dissecting industry projections for sustainable aviation fuel through 2026, and looking at the corporate strategy of manufacturers like Dassault Aviation.
And, what ties all those completely disparate documents together is just this relentless pursuit of hyper-efficiency.
Right.
I mean, it is a comprehensive look at the machinery built explicitly to manipulate the clock.
So as we dive into this, I want you, listening, to try and adopt that CEO mindset we just talked about.
Yeah, put yourself in those shoes.
Exactly. I want you to imagine what your life, your business, and your entire concept of geography would look like if you had the liquidity to simply opt out of shared public infrastructure entirely.
Just opting out of waiting in line forever.
If you never had to wait for a scheduled departure ever again. So let's start with the catalyst here. If people are paying massive premiums to abandon commercial airlines, we really need to understand the mechanics of that exodus.
And that Business Jet Traveler survey gives us the exact anatomy of that frustration. It's fascinating because it completely shatters the Hollywood caricature of private aviation.
Oh, totally. Because when respondents were asked to identify their primary frustrations with commercial airline travel, the complaints about exclusivity barely even registered.
Right. I think only 32% cited a lack of privacy.
Which is wild to me.
Yeah, and even fewer, like 21%, complained about inadequate onboard amenities or not being able to conduct business in the cabin.
So this whole idea that billionaires are flying private just because they absolutely refuse to share breathing air with the general public is, mathematically speaking, totally false.
It's a complete myth. It really is a profound misconception. The real drivers are entirely logistical.
Let's get into those numbers.
Yeah, so 66% of respondents. I mean, that's an overwhelming two-thirds majority state. Their primary reason for abandoning commercial airlines is a lack of airports near my departure points and destinations.
Okay, wait, let's dissect that 66% for a second, because when I hear that, I think, why is the commercial map so restrictive? I mean, we have massive international airports everywhere.
Well, we do have massive airports, but they are incredibly concentrated. And to understand why this drives the time economy, you have to look at the economic architecture of commercial aviation.
Right, which fundamentally shifted a while back, right?
Yeah, after the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978.
Yeah.
Before deregulation, the government kind of dictated routes, meaning airlines flew point to point even if the route lost money.
Okay.
But after deregulation, airlines suddenly had to survive on these razor-thin margins. And to do that, they adopted the hub-and-spoke model.
Right. I use a biological analogy for this all the time. The commercial airline network is exactly like the human circulatory system.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Well, the major airlines are the massive arteries, right? They pump massive volume, hundreds of thousands of passengers, but they only pump to the major organs like Chicago, Atlanta, Frankfurt, Tokyo.
That's a great way to put it. And if your destination isn't a major organ, the system becomes incredibly inefficient for the individual cell, to use your analogy.
Right.
Like, if you want to get from a mid-sized market, say Greenville, South Carolina, to another mid-sized market like Peoria, Illinois.
The commercial airline forces you to fly from Greenville all the way up to a hub like Atlanta or Charlotte first.
Exactly. You change planes, you wait around the terminal, and then you take another spoke all the way out to Peoria.
Which turns a journey that should be, what, maybe 600 miles?
Into a 1,000-mile zigzag that takes an entire day.
Right. It's crazy.
And, I mean, the hub-and-spoke model is an economic miracle for the airline's bottom line. It allows them to consolidate passengers and maximize their load factors.
Meaning they rarely fly with empty seats.
Right. It completely dictates their efficiency.
Yeah.
But it just absolutely destroys the passenger's efficiency.
Yeah, you're on their time now.
Exactly. Whereas private aviation, returning to your analogy, acts as the capillary network. It operates strictly point to point.
It goes directly to the tissue that needs the resource?
Precisely.
Yeah.
I mean, the United States alone, there are over 5,000 public use airports.
5,000.
Over 5,000. But the major commercial airlines, the massive arteries, they only service roughly 500 of them.
Wow. So commercial aviation effectively ignores 90% of the country's aviation infrastructure.
They have to. Because you cannot land a massive Boeing 737 on a 4,000-foot runway in some rural county.
Right.
And you certainly can't find 150 people every single day who want to fly from that specific rural county to another specific rural county.
Makes sense. So private aviation just unlocks that dormant 90%.
Exactly. It allows that CEO in our opening scenario to fly her engineer directly from a little municipal airport near Munich straight to a regional airstrip 3 miles from the Dayton factory line.
So when that 66% of survey respondents complain about route networks, they are essentially saying the commercial map does not reflect the reality of my global operations.
That's exactly what they're saying.
Okay, I follow the geography argument. That makes total sense. But I have to push back heavily on the second biggest complaint in this BJT survey.
Which one?
Well, 49% of these high net worth individuals say they fly private to avoid wait times in airports.
Right.
You know, sitting at the gate, waiting in security lines.
Right.
Here's my skepticism with that. We live in an era of hyper-optimized commercial travel for the wealthy. I mean, we have clear biometric scanning.
True.
We have TSA PreCheck. We have global entry. We even have those crazy private commercial terminals like PS down at LAX where they literally drive you to the plane in a Porsche.
Yeah, the PS terminal is wild.
Right. So the commercial airport experience for a rich person is already incredibly streamlined. Are we really supposed to believe that these people are dropping $50,000 on a charter flight just to avoid a 5-minute pre-check line?
You know, that is a very common counter-argument, but it completely miscalculates the true metric here, which is door-to-door dead time.
Door-to-door dead time. Okay, explain that.
It's not just the 5 minutes of the security checkpoint. It is the cumulative friction of the entire commercial apparatus. Because even with Clear and a private lounge, the commercial airline still dictates your schedule.
Because the plane leaves at 8:00 a.m. regardless of your preference.
Exactly. If your big meeting in New York ends early, say 2:00 p.m., but your super optimized first-class commercial flight doesn't leave until 6:40 p.m., you just have 4 hours of dead time,
You're just sitting there.
just sitting there. And you still have to arrive at the airport at least an hour early, even with pre-check, to account for baggage cutoff times and, boarding sequences.
Right, because you have to wait for 300 other people to board the aircraft.
And you have to wait for them to deplane on the other side.
Hmm.
And you have to wait for the ground handlers to get your luggage off the carousel.
So you're literally tethered to the lowest common denominator of the crowd's speed.
Yes. When you tally up all that mandatory scheduled buffer time, the boarding process, the taxi times at those massive, congested hubs, and the baggage retrieval, a 3-hour commercial flight usually consumes at least 7 hours of your day.
Wow. Yeah, that math checks out.
Now, contrast that with the private tarmac experience. The aircraft operates entirely on your command.
Right.
So if your meeting ends early at 2:00 p.m., you drive directly onto the tarmac at, say, Teterboro Airport.
Mm.
Your car pulls right up to the stairs of the jet. The engines are literally already spooling.
You don't even go inside a building.
No building. The pilots load your bags directly from your trunk into the cargo hold. You do not take off your shoes. You do not empty your pockets. You walk up the stairs, you sit down, and the door closes.
So the friction is mathematically reduced to zero.
You are wheels up in less than 10 minutes. You have essentially performed an arbitrage on your own day.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to phrase it.
You have spent capital to reclaim 4 unrecoverable hours. And for the demographic we are talking about, the hourly value of their strategic decision-making just far exceeds the cost of the aviation fuel.
So it's really not about avoiding the annoyance of taking off their shoes at TSA. It's about eliminating the systemic drag of scheduled infrastructure.
Exactly.
Which I think leads perfectly into the third major complaint from the survey. 35% point to the unreliability of flight schedules.
This is perhaps the most critical post-pandemic shift in the entire psychology of the time economy.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. The global commercial aviation system has just demonstrated a profound fragility over the last few years.
Oh, for sure. We have seen cascading failures caused by, localized weather events, massive IT outages, chronic air traffic controller shortages.
It feels like every summer there is a week where thousands of flights are just wiped off the board completely.
Yeah. And we see footage on the news of people sleeping on yoga mats in the Denver airport.
And that visual, the stranded passenger, that is utterly terrifying to an executive operating on a hyper-compressed timeline.
Because they can't afford to be on a yoga mat.
Unreliability is no longer an anomaly in commercial aviation, right? It is a baked-in probability.
Right.
I mean, for a family going on vacation to Florida, a canceled flight is a massive headache. But for the individuals utilizing the time economy, a canceled flight is an existential business threat.
If you are finalizing a multi-billion-dollar corporate merger, you literally cannot miss the final sign-off meeting just because your airline couldn't find a co-pilot in Atlanta.
Exactly. So the premium paid for a private flight is essentially certainty insurance.
Certainty insurance, I love that term.
You are purchasing a statistically guaranteed outcome. You're paying real money to immunize yourself against the cascading variables that paralyze the public commercial network.
Okay, so if avoiding the hubs, eliminating the dead time, and buying that certainty insurance are the primary motivations, what does the actual execution of this lifestyle look like?
What do you mean?
Well, the abstract concept of flying private is one thing, but the BJT survey gives us the actual operational cadence, right? How often are these people actually deploying their time machines?
Ah, yes. The frequency data paints a very clear picture of utility versus excess.
Because I assume they're just flying everywhere all the time.
You think so, but no. When asked how much they fly privately in a typical year, the largest cohort, which is 33%, report flying between 25 and 50 hours annually.
Wait, 25 to 50 hours? That actually sounds way lower than I would have guessed.
It surprises a lot of people. Another 24% fly between 51 and 75 hours, and 22% fly 76 to 100 hours.
So very few people are basically living on these jets.
Right. Only 10% are flying more than 100 hours a year.
Okay, so the absolute sweet spot, the core of this entire industry, is the user who spends roughly 50 hours a year in the air.
Exactly.
Let's translate that into actual human movement. What does a 50-hour flight profile look like on an executive's calendar?
Well, a standard domestic hop, say from Chicago to Miami or London to Geneva, is roughly 2.5 hours each way.
Okay.
So a round trip consumes 5 hours of your annual budget.
Meaning 50 hours translates to 10 of those round trips a year.
Right.
That's less than one a month.
Correct. Or if their operations are global, it might equate to just 3 or 4 major intercontinental flights a year.
Wow.
This data is so crucial because it completely dispels the notion of the billionaire using a private jet to fly out for a sandwich every afternoon.
Right. They aren't treating it like an Uber to go grab lunch.
No, these assets are deployed surgically. They're highly calculated, high-stakes deployments meant to solve very specific geographic problems over a fiscal year.
Which brings us to the actual hardware being engineered to solve the most extreme versions of those geographic problems,
Oh,
the
yeah.
ultra-long-range sector.
This is where the engineering gets wild.
Yeah, we have some fascinating updates from Aviation International News regarding Dassault Aviation, the French aerospace manufacturer.
Dassault is a phenomenal case study in the extreme upper echelon of the time economy.
What are they doing right now?
Well, they are currently dedicating massive resources toward the entry into service of their new flagship, which is the Falcon 10X. They are targeting 2027 for that.
Okay.
And they are also aggressively pushing their newly certified Falcon 6X into the market.
I was actually looking at the specifications for this 10X, and the numbers are, frankly, absurd. It's designed to cruise at Mach 0.925.
Yeah, it is operating at the very edge of the sound barrier.
That's incredibly fast.
It really enters a hyper-competitive arena against the Bombardier Global 7500 and the Gulfstream G700. The 10X really represents the pinnacle of planetary reach.
Planetary reach meaning?
It is engineered specifically for routes like New York to Shanghai or Los Angeles to Sydney, nonstop,
Without refueling.
without a single fuel stop.
So if the smaller jets are all about avoiding a layover in Atlanta, the 10X is about avoiding a layover in Anchorage or Dubai.
Exactly. It scales that point-to-point philosophy up to a global level. And you can really see the strategic imperative in Dassault's corporate movements right now.
What are they doing?
Well, the literature notes they launched a major demonstration tour for the 6X at the Singapore Air Show, and they are massively expanding their maintenance and service footprint with a huge new facility in Kuala Lumpur.
Ah, so they are following the tectonic shift in global wealth.
Precisely. The Asia-Pacific region is a massive growth engine for this demographic.
Because if your corporate footprint requires constant physical presence between financial centers in London, New York, and Hong Kong, a commercial layover is not just an inconvenience.
No, it's a massive liability. Every time an aircraft lands for fuel, it introduces friction. It requires new airspace clearance, ground handling, refueling logistics, weather window approvals.
Not to mention the security footprint.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you are a high-profile target or a head of state, you really do not want to be sitting on a tarmac in a secondary country waiting for a fuel truck.
Your vulnerability just increases exponentially the longer you are on the ground.
Right.
So the engineering mandate behind the Falcon 10X is quite literal.
Yeah.
Delete the layover from existence entirely.
Okay, I totally understand the need for speed and range. That makes sense. But I really have to bring up the physical design of the aircraft because to me it feels like a massive contradiction.
How so?
Well, the 10X cabin is 9 feet 1 inch wide and 6 feet 8 inches tall.
It's massive.
It is the largest cross-section of any purpose-built business jet ever. It holds up to 19 passengers, but typically flies with maybe 5 or 6.
Right.
It has multiple distinct living zones, including a master suite with a full-size bed and a stand-up shower.
It is essentially a luxury penthouse with swept wings.
Right. And this is where my logic totally trips up.
Okay, lay it on me.
If the entire philosophy of the time economy is about raw efficiency, getting from point A to point B as fast as physically possible, why build a flying apartment? Wouldn't a sleeker, narrower, lighter fuselage technically fly faster, burn less fuel, and save more time? Does it stop being about buying time at this level and just become an exercise in taking your mansion with you to show off?
It's a very sharp observation, and from a pure aerodynamic standpoint, you're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
A smaller cross-section creates less drag. But your question misses the invisible biological component of the time economy.
The biological component.
Yes. When you are operating on a planetary scale, the physical comfort of the passenger is the time management.
Wait, I need you to unpack that. How does a shower equate to time management?
We have to look at human physiology. Think about what happens to a human body when you fly 15 hours commercially, even in international first class.
Right.
What is the physical toll of that journey on you?
Well, you land feeling completely hollowed out. Dehydrated, exhausted, massive brain fog.
Exactly. You essentially need a full 24, sometimes 48 hours to reset your circadian rhythm and just function at a basic level.
You literally lose 2 days on the ground just attempting to recover.
And why does that happen?
Because sitting still for 15 hours is awful.
Partly, but it is primarily due to cabin altitude.
Cabin altitude.
Yeah, a traditional commercial airliner, because of the stress on its aluminum fuselage, pressurizes the cabin to an equivalent altitude of about 8,000 feet above sea level.
Whoa. So for 15 hours, your body thinks it's sitting on top of a mountain in Colorado.
Exactly. Your blood oxygen saturation drops. Your heart has to work harder.
And the air is so dry.
Right. The air is purposely stripped of moisture to prevent corrosion in the airframe, which dehydrates all your tissues. And the constant, low-frequency roar of the engines induces severe fatigue.
It's basically a mild form of torture.
It is. So by the time you land in Tokyo, your biological systems are severely compromised.
Okay, so how does the massive cabin of the 10X change the physics of that?
Aircraft like the 10X or the Gulfstream G700, they utilize advanced composite materials and reinforced alloys that allow the fuselage to handle much higher pressure differentials.
Meaning they don't have to simulate an 8,000-foot mountain.
Right. They can pressurize the cabin to feel like 3,000 feet or even lower while cruising at 50,000 feet in the air.
Oh, wow. So your blood oxygen remains totally normal?
Your physiology remains basically at sea level.
Mm.
Furthermore, the air inside is completely replaced with fresh air every 2 to 3 minutes.
It's not just recirculated coughs.
Not at all. But the space itself, the sheer volume of the flying apartment you mentioned, that is the ultimate weapon against jet lag.
Because it allows you to simulate a normal terrestrial day.
Precisely. If you depart New York at 8:00 p.m. for a 14-hour flight to Shanghai, you do not sit in a recliner for 14 hours. You utilize the real estate to preserve your biological clock. So you might spend the first 3 hours in the boardroom zone conducting a final strategy review with your team.
Just like you would at the office.
Then you transition to the private suite. You get into a real horizontal bed in absolute silence, and you achieve 8 hours of deep, uninterrupted REM sleep.
Which you simply cannot do in a commercial seat, no matter how much it reclines.
Never. So you wake up, you take a hot shower, eat a biologically appropriate meal, and review your notes.
And then, when the door opens in Shanghai...
You step onto the tarmac, operating at 100% cognitive capacity.
That's incredible.
You bypass the hotel entirely, you walk straight into the boardroom and execute the negotiation.
So the flying garment didn't just save you the layover time, it saved you the 48 hours of recovery time on the ground.
In this bracket of extreme wealth, they're not just buying speed, they're purchasing the ability to basically ignore the Earth's rotation entirely.
Wow.
They are paying to ensure they are always present and effective at peak capacity, totally immune to the physical degradation of travel.
They are literally buying the preservation of their own biology.
Exactly.
That fundamentally changes how I look at these machines. But it brings us to a massive practical question.
Financing.
Yes, financing. We know why they are fleeing the airlines. We know the physiological engineering they are utilizing. But how are they actually financing
This
this?
is the big question.
Because the sticker price of a Dassault 10X is roughly $75 million. And keeping it fueled, crewed, and maintained costs millions more every single year.
Absolutely.
Surely the vast majority of people buying back their time cannot just drop that kind of capital.
And they don't. And this is perhaps the most heavily misunderstood aspect of the industry from the outside looking in.
You don't have to buy the plane.
You absolutely do not have to purchase an aircraft to participate in the time economy.
Okay, so how does it work?
The business models that support this ecosystem are highly stratified, and that BJT survey provides a brilliant breakdown of how capital is actually deployed here.
Let's dive into those numbers then. The survey asked respondents how they plan to fly privately over the next 2 years.
And the market fragmentation is wild.
It really is. 39% say they plan to fly via charter.
So chartering is the purest form of on-demand access.
How so?
You call a company, you tell them you need a light jet to go from Dallas to Aspen next Tuesday. They quote you a price for that specific trip. You pay it, and you are done.
No long-term commitment at all.
None. Then 37% say they plan to fly via fractional shares.
Fractional shares, that sounds like a timeshare.
Sort of, but it's a completely different legal and operational model, usually operating under Part 91K regulations in the U.S.
Okay, don't get too technical on me.
Right, sorry. Instead of renting a trip, you are actually purchasing an equity share of a specific physical aircraft.
Oh, like a 1/16 or 1/8 share of a Bombardier Challenger.
Exactly. So you literally own a piece of that specific tail number
Okay.
that entitles you to a guaranteed allotment of hours per year on that aircraft type, usually 50 or 100 hours. You pay a monthly management fee and then an hourly rate when you actually fly.
Got it. And then the third major group, 36%, plan to fly via jet cards or membership clubs.
Right, jet cards are essentially prepaid debit cards for flight time.
You just load it up with cash.
Yeah, you wire a company a couple $100,000 to lock in, say, 25 hours of flight time at a fixed hourly rate.
So it insulates you from market fluctuations.
Exactly, and guarantees availability without the legal complexity of taking actual ownership of an asset.
Okay, so we have 39% charter, 37% fractional, and 36% jet cards. It is an almost perfect three-way split.
It really is.
What does that equilibrium tell us about the industry's evolution?
It tells us that the industry has successfully engineered what we call a staircase of access.
A staircase of access.
Yeah. They realized a long time ago that forcing someone to leap from a commercial boarding pass directly to a $70 million purchase was just terrible business.
Because nobody's going to make that jump.
Right. So they created incremental stepping stones. Jet cards are the low-friction entry point. Fractional shares are for the consistent, predictable flyer who wants the tax depreciation benefits without the full burden.
And whole ownership sits at the very top.
Exactly. But what is truly fascinating is how sticky the lower tiers of that staircase have actually become.
Sticky, meaning people don't want to move up.
Yes. Look at this specific statistics in the survey. Of the respondents who currently use charters, 47% plan to continue chartering indefinitely.
Indefinitely. Wow. Nearly half of the charter market has absolutely zero intention of ever moving up the staircase.
Not at all.
And only 20% of them plan to eventually graduate to whole ownership.
Right.
So let me pose a theory here.
Let's hear it.
If 47% are happily staying with an on-demand rental model indefinitely, does that mean the broader macroeconomic trend of the subscription economy has fully conquered private aviation?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, is the ultimate flex among the elite no longer owning the jet, but simply having fictionless access to one, completely divorced from the physical liability of the machine?
Your theory is entirely supported by the operational reality. We see this across all sectors.
Yeah.
Software as a service, mobility as a service.
Jet as a service.
Exactly. High net worth individuals are fiercely calculating. They recognize that owning a complex piece of aerospace engineering is a massive, relentless logistical burden.
I would imagine it's like running a small, highly regulated company that bleeds money every single day it sits on the tarmac.
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
If you own the jet outright, you have to hire and retain highly qualified pilots, which is currently incredibly difficult due to a massive global pilot shortage.
Right.
You have to secure hangar space in highly congested airports. You have to manage insurance, regulatory compliance, and most critically, maintenance.
Oh, and maintenance brings us back to that Dassault article we looked at.
Yes, exactly.
The piece actually noted that Dassault's aircraft deliveries dipped in 2023 because of severe supply chain disruptions.
Yes. The global aerospace supply chain is incredibly fragile right now.
So even the manufacturers can't get parts.
Right. So if you own a Gulfstream and a specific avionics sensor fails, and that part is back-ordered for 3 months,
Your multi-million-dollar asset is grounded.
it is a very expensive paperweight sitting in a hangar.
Your certainty insurance is completely voided.
Precisely. By utilizing charters, jet cards, or fractional models, these individuals are aggressively outsourcing that liability.
They're making it someone else's problem.
They are paying management companies like NetJets or FlexJet to absorb all the headaches of pilot retention and supply chain logistics.
Because they don't want to run an aviation department.
No. They want to purchase the pure, distilled, final product. The flight itself. They are buying the time, not the aluminum.
Buying the time, not the aluminum. That distinction is perfectly illustrated by another data point here regarding how these charters are actually booked.
Oh, the broker data.
Yeah. Among those who charter, An overwhelming 83% prefer to book directly through the flight operator.
Well, only 17% prefer to use a charter broker.
Now, for the listener, a broker is basically a middleman who scans the entire market to find you the best price on an empty plane.
Right, like a travel agent for private jets.
So why are 83% of people completely bypassing the person whose literal job is to save them money?
Because in the time economy, friction is more expensive than the broker's discount.
Wow.
It all circles back to the concept of certainty insurance. If you use a broker, you introduce a layer of abstraction.
Right, because the broker doesn't own the plane.
They don't own the plane, they don't employ the pilots, and they don't control the maintenance schedule.
So if something goes wrong,
If a snowstorm hits or a mechanical issue arises 2 hours before departure, you are calling a broker, who then has to call the operator, who then has to call the crew.
it's a giant game of telephone while the clock is ticking.
And the CEO from our opening scenario cannot afford a game of telephone while her factory is bleeding $200,000 an hour.
Definitely not.
Exactly. By booking directly with the operator, the passenger establishes a direct, unmediated line to the physical asset.
You are talking to the people who have the authority to instantly swap the tail number or reroute a crew to solve the problem.
Removing the middleman just increases the velocity of problem solving.
Okay, so if this whole world of frictionless point-to-point travel is so heavily reliant on direct access and eliminating middlemen, how do people even find the door to this club in the first place?
That's a great question.
Because you don't exactly see television commercials for NetJets during the Super Bowl.
No, you definitely don't.
The survey actually asked a brilliant question. The first time you ever flew privately was?
And the answers completely reveal the psychological genius of how this industry expands.
Yeah, the top answers were definitely not, I walked into a dealership and bought one.
No.
33% said their first private flight was on their company's aircraft, and 32% said it was on a friend's aircraft.
So you combine those, and you realize that 65% of all participants in the time economy were introduced to it entirely through their social or corporate network.
It is the ultimate velvet rope marketing strategy. It relies entirely on this peer-to-peer experiential virus.
Experiential virus. That is a highly accurate way to describe it.
Because you can't just explain it to someone.
You don't convince someone to spend $10,000 an hour by handing them a brochure. The conversion happens in real time.
Walk me through that.
Well, imagine a successful entrepreneur sitting in a crowded, chaotic commercial terminal. Their flight has been delayed twice. They are stressed, they are exhausted, and they are losing valuable time.
We've all been there.
Right. Then their business partner or a peer in their network calls them and says, "Hey, my company jet is at the private terminal right across the runway. We are heading the exact same direction. I have an open seat. Come with me."
So they literally just walk across the runway.
They walk across the runway. They completely skip the security line. The engines spool up the second they sit down, and they land at their destination before their original commercial flight even boards.
Oh, man. And in that singular, profound moment of contrast, the product sells itself forever.
It does. Once a human being experiences the visceral reality of reclaiming their autonomy, of stepping onto that teleportation pad, the psychological threshold is permanently crossed.
It's a one-way door. They look back at the commercial terminal and they realize they can never, ever go back to waiting at the bus stop.
The network effect is really the primary engine of growth for the entire sector.
So we've thoroughly established how the ultra-wealthy use business models and long-range engineering to conquer geographic distance, right?
We have. They have solved the continent-to-continent problem.
But the time economy is facing a massive evolution right now because the friction isn't just over the oceans anymore.
No, the friction is right outside their front door.
Right. And it brings us to the future of mobility, which is governed by a completely new regulatory and environmental framework.
Yes. The macro-mobility solutions like the Dassaults and the Gulfstreams, they are incredibly mature.
But the micromobility sector, how we actually conquer the last mile, is currently in the middle of a massive real-time technological revolution.
And simultaneously, the entire industry is being forced to reckon with the environmental cost of their time machines.
So let's break this into two distinct tracks based on our sources.
Okay.
First, the hardware revolution of eVTOLs, and second, the chemical revolution of sustainable aviation fuel.
Let's start with the hardware.
Yeah, we're looking at a real-time certification tracker for eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft.
Now, for the listener, the absolute easiest way to conceptualize an eVTOL is to think of a massive passenger-carrying drone.
Like the drones you buy at Best Buy, but giant.
Exactly. They rely on distributed electric propulsion, meaning multiple small electric rotors,
Mm.
rather than a single massive combustion engine like a traditional helicopter.
They honestly look like science fiction,
Yeah.
but the tracker shows they are very, very close to reality. What are the major geopolitical milestones happening right now?
Well, the tracker reveals a fierce regulatory race across three massive global markets right now.
Okay, who's winning?
The most advanced milestone currently belongs to EHang, which is a manufacturer in China. Their Ep.013 model has achieved 100% type certification from the SIAC, which is the Civil Aviation Administration of China.
Wow. Which means the Chinese government has officially declared the vehicle safe for commercial passenger operations.
Yes, they have entirely crossed the finish line of airworthiness.
And what about the U.S.?
In the United States, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, is processing companies through a very rigorous staged approach.
They're taking their time.
Yeah. Joby Aviation has achieved what is called a G4 certification basis, meaning they have finally agreed on the exact testing parameters and are in the final compliance demonstration phase.
Okay.
And another company, Beta Technologies, has achieved their G1 basis.
So the U.S. is methodically grinding through all the red tape, while China is already green-lighting operations. And what about in Europe?
Well, under EASA, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, companies like Volocopter are deep into active flight testing, heavily pushing for operational capability in major cities like Paris.
Okay, let me pause here and ask a mechanical question.
Sure.
Because this tracker shows years and years of bureaucratic back and forth. Why is it so incredibly difficult to certify an eVTOL? I mean, we've had helicopters for 80 years. Why doesn't the FAA just treat these like electric helicopters and stamp the paperwork?
Because the underlying physics and, more importantly, the failure states are completely alien to legacy aviation regulation.
Oh, so.
Well, a traditional helicopter is a mechanical marvel, but it has a built-in safety mechanism called auto-rotation.
Auto-rotation.
Yeah, if the engine dies completely, the pilot can actually use the air rushing up through the main rotor to maintain control and glide to a relatively safe landing.
Oh, really?
Yes, the mechanical linkage physically allows it.
So it's like a built-in parachute made of aerodynamics.
Exactly, it's a mechanical fail-safe. eVTOLs, however, do not have that mechanical linkage.
Oh.
They rely entirely on distributed electric propulsion, maybe 6, 8, or 12 completely independent electric motors and propellers.
Right.
They are entirely fly-by-wire. The pilot, or the autonomous computer, is not physically moving a rotor blade with a stick. They are sending a digital signal to a software program.
And that software program does what?
It micro-adjusts the speed of a dozen different electric motors milliseconds at a time to maintain stability.
Oh, I see. So if the software glitches or the main battery bus fails...
It doesn't glide, it drops.
Yikes. That's terrifying.
And that is the FAA's primary concern. The regulatory bodies require these manufacturers to mathematically prove a safety record equivalent to commercial airliners.
What's that number?
It's what they call a 10 to the minus ninth failure rate, which is one catastrophic failure per billion flight hours.
Per billion?
Per billion, proving that an entirely new architecture of software, high-voltage batteries, and redundant electrical buses can actually meet that standard without decades of historical flight data. That is a monumental engineering and documentation challenge.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. They aren't certifying a new aircraft. They are certifying an entirely new philosophy of flight.
Precisely.
But that begs the question, why are billions of dollars pouring into this specific race? What is the core problem that eDTL solves for the time economy?
It solves the paradox of the last mile.
The last mile.
Yeah, we discussed the CEO utilizing that Dassault 10X to fly from New York to Los Angeles at Mach 0.9.
Right, crossing the entire continent in 5 hours.
But when they land at a private terminal at LAX or Van Nuys, they are forced to get out of the jet and get into a car.
Oh, right. And instantly their $70 million time machine is rendered completely useless by rush hour traffic on the 405 freeway.
Exactly. They might spend 2 hours just trying to get from the airport to their meeting in downtown LA.
That is infuriating.
The last mile is always the slowest, most unpredictable mile. So eVTOLs are explicitly designed to bypass urban gridlock.
Because they can just fly over it?
They are quiet enough to operate in dense city centers and electric, meaning zero emissions at the point of use.
So if private jets are the teleportation paths between continents, eVTOLs are essentially the Uber Black of the urban sky.
They are the ultimate on-demand micromobility solution. And the geopolitical race we see on the tracker, China versus the U.S. versus Europe, is not just about corporate pride.
It's an economic race.
It is an economic arms race. The region that certifies and integrates this technology first gives its commercial centers a massive efficiency advantage.
Right.
It shrinks the functional footprint of a megacity, allowing capital and decision makers to move without any friction.
That is huge. But that brings us to the massive collision course happening in the industry right now.
The fuel issue.
Exactly. Because while flying a quiet electric drone across Manhattan sounds utopian, the vast majority of the time economy, the heavy jets crossing oceans, still relies entirely on burning thousands of gallons of kerosene.
Very true.
And the new currency the industry must reckon with is carbon. Our source material from IEC on sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, indicates that a massive paradigm shift is totally imminent.
The SAF report is arguably the most consequential document in our stack today. It projects that by 2026, the SAF market will fundamentally shift from a phase of just demonstration and localized testing into a fully institutionalized global market.
Okay, so what exactly is forcing that shift? Is it just corporate goodwill, or is a hammer coming down?
It is entirely driven by policy and regulation. The aviation sector is incredibly difficult to decarbonize.
Right, because you can't just put batteries in everything.
No, you absolutely cannot put heavy lithium-ion batteries in a Sol 10X and expect it to cross the Pacific Ocean. The energy density of liquid fuel is still completely mandatory for long-haul flight.
So what's the solution?
Governments are implementing aggressive structures to force the transition to sustainable aviation fuel, which is made from renewable biomass, waste oils, or even synthesized directly from captured carbon.
So it's real jet fuel, it just isn't pumped out of the ground.
Correct. It is chemically identical to traditional jet fuel, but its life cycle carbon emissions are up to 80% lower.
That's a huge reduction.
It is. And the shift is being driven by heavy mandates, like the European Union's Refuel EU initiative.
What'd that do?
It legally requires fuel suppliers to blend a specific percentage of SAF into all fuel uplisted at EU airports. Period.
They just have to do it. And in the U.S.?
In the United States, the mechanism is the Inflation Reduction Act, which provides massive tax incentives to build the production facilities.
Ah, I see. So the EU is using the stick and the U.S. is using the carrot.
Exactly. The MBAA fact book we reviewed also heavily emphasizes this pivot. The entire business aviation lobby recognizes that their social license to operate is expiring.
Because it just looks so bad to be burning all that fuel.
Right. Buying back your time cannot come at the expense of ignoring global climate targets. The optics, and very soon the actual laws, simply will not permit it.
But the IEK report highlights a massive structural bottleneck here. It notes that the primary hurdle isn't just producing the SAF, the bottleneck is the airport infrastructure itself.
Yes, the storage and mixing capabilities.
Why is that the bottleneck? I mean, if it's chemically identical to jet fuel, why can't they just pour it into the existing tanks at the airport and let the planes fill up?
Because of how the fuel supply chain is physically engineered. AF is a drop-in fuel, meaning the airplane's engines don't care at all if it's burning regular Jet A or SAF.
Right.
But the regulatory framework requires precise accounting of the blending ratios, and most major airports operate on a massive shared pipeline system.
Oh, they don't have individual tanks for each plane.
No, they don't have individual tanks for individual airlines or private operators. It's basically a giant communal pool of fuel underneath the tarmac.
So if you dump pure SAF into the communal pool, you can't guarantee who is getting what ratio.
Exactly. Pure, unblended SAF often requires dedicated parallel supply chains completely off airport.
Oh, wow.
It must be transported to specialized, highly calibrated mixing facilities where it is blended with a traditional fuel to exact certified specifications before it is legally allowed to enter the airport's hydrant system.
That sounds incredibly expensive.
It is. Building those dedicated off-airport mixing facilities and the parallel pipelines to deliver the pure SAF requires massive capital expenditure. The airports simply do not have the physical footprint or the funding to build this infrastructure overnight.
And the report mentions that the Asia-Pacific region is aggressively attacking this exact bottleneck.
Yes. Major hubs in Singapore, Japan, and South Korea are aggressively investing state capital to build these specialized blending hubs.
Because they want to be the go-to spots.
They want to position themselves as the premium green refueling stops for the global time economy.
So let me connect the dots here. If SAF requires massive new production facilities, parallel pipelines, and complex off-airport mixing infrastructure, it is going to be significantly more expensive than just refining crude oil.
In the near to medium term, yes, it carries a substantial price premium.
Which means the time economy is about to get a massive new toll booth.
That's a good way to put it.
If high net worth individuals and corporations want to continue bypassing the commercial hubs and flying point to point, they are going to be forced to absorb this green premium.
That is the inevitable reality of the next decade. Sustainability is no longer just a public relations talking point. It is actively transitioning into a fixed, mandatory cost of doing business.
You literally have to pay to play.
The right to fly privately will increasingly be contingent on the ability to do so without expanding one's carbon footprint.
So those who wish to maintain their grip on the ultimate luxury, which is time, will have to absorb the cost of gas.
It simply becomes another line item on the invoice of certainty.
It really is a fascinating evolution. The time economy is finally adapting to its physical limits.
It is.
It is electrifying the short, urban hops with EV tolls to beat the traffic, and it is decarbonizing the long oceanic hauls with synthetic fuels to beat the regulations.
A two-pronged approach.
Exactly. But whether a machine is running on complex lithium-ion matrices or blended biofuels, someone still has to bend the metal and actually build the aircraft.
Yes, the manufacturers.
Which brings us to the final piece of our puzzle today. In a market where price is practically irrelevant, how do the time-rich actually choose their machines? What brands command the loyalty of this demographic?
The BJT Reader's Choice Survey gives us a very clear snapshot of brand preference, and it completely validates everything we've discussed regarding hyper-efficiency.
So it's not just about flashy logos.
Not at all. Brand loyalty in this sector is not driven by superficial luxury. It is driven entirely by absolute mission capability.
Walk us through the heavyweights. Who is winning the arms race at the top?
In the heavy and ultra-long-range jet categories, Gulfstream remains an absolute dominant force.
Yeah, that's a name everyone knows.
The survey shows overwhelming preference for their flagship models, like the G800 and the G500.
And who else?
Bombardier holds incredibly strong in the mid-size category with their Challenger 3500, and their Global Series competes fiercely for the intercontinental routes.
We talked about Dassault earlier, so we basically have the big three fighting for the oceanic routes.
Right.
But what about the smaller end of the spectrum? The aircraft making the 2-hour regional hops.
In the light jet category, the Embraer Phenom 300E is a massive, consistent favorite.
I see those everywhere at private airports.
Yeah, it is practically the workhorse of the fractional and charter markets. But perhaps the most interesting data point in the entire brand survey is the overwhelming popularity of the Pilatus PC-12 NGX.
Okay, yes, I was looking at that. The Pilatus PC-12 is a single-engine turboprop.
A propeller plane.
Right. In an industry totally obsessed with speed and prestige, why is a single-engine propeller plane consistently ranked as a favorite among people who can effortlessly afford a jet?
Because, as I mentioned, brand preference equals mission capability.
Right.
If your mission is to cross the Pacific Ocean, sleep in a bed, and arrive in Tokyo, a Gulfstream is the tool for the job.
Obviously.
But what if your mission requires you to visit a remote mining operation in northern Canada or, a rural manufacturing plant in Montana?
A Gulfstream is useless there.
It's completely useless. It's too heavy, it flies too fast, and it requires thousands of feet of pristine paved runway. The Gulfstream physically cannot land there.
But the Pilatus can.
The Pilatus PC-12, however, is engineered like the ultimate luxury off-road vehicle.
Off-road vehicle, I like that.
Has a massive cargo door. It is explicitly designed to land on short, unpaved strips, dirt, grass, or gravel.
Really? A luxury plane landing on dirt?
Literally hundreds of miles from a major airport. It can land practically in the parking lot of the factory.
So it saves time on a completely different geometric axis. The Gulfstream saves time through raw speed over the ocean. The Pilatus saves time by ignoring the need for pavement entirely.
Precisely. And we see the exact same utilitarian logic in the helicopter preferences in the survey.
What do people prefer for helicopters?
The survey shows very strong loyalty to Bell, specifically the 412 and 429 models, and the Sikorsky S-92.
Those are pretty big machines, right?
Yes, these are not delicate aesthetic machines. They are rugged, proven, all-weather workhorses known for an operational reliability that borders on the indestructible.
That observation crystallizes this entire investigation for me.
How so?
Well, when we look at Dassault, Gulfstream, and Bombardier, they are engaged in this fierce, multi-billion-dollar corporate arms race, but they are not competing on price.
Wrong.
You never see a clearance sale for a private jet. They are competing entirely on range, speed, and above all else, mechanical reliability.
Because in the time economy, a broken airplane means a broken schedule.
And a broken schedule means you have forfeited the one thing you paid tens of millions of dollars to protect.
Time.
Time. It always comes back to time.
It always does.
Well, we have covered a truly massive amount of ground today, peeling back the layers of an economy most people only ever see from the ground looking up.
It really is a complex ecosystem, but when you synthesize the data, the BJT behavioral surveys, the NBAA's economic advocacy, the EVTL certification hurdles, and the supply chain logistics of sustainable fuel, the central thesis becomes undeniable.
What's that?
Private aviation is not an exercise in indulgence. It is an exercise in extreme calculated efficiency.
Absolutely. We started by looking at the core frustrations driving the exodus from commercial airlines. The realization that the hub-and-spoke system is economically brilliant for the airline, but temporally devastating for the passenger.
Right.
We unpacked the reality of door-to-door dead time and how chartering a jet is essentially an act of certainty insurance against a fragile public network.
And we looked at how those flight hours translate into a lifestyle that utilizes advanced physiological engineering.
The flying apartments.
Yes, flying apartments pressurized to sea level to literally outrun jet lag and preserve the biological clock.
We also dismantled the myth of ownership, revealing how the majority of the market utilizes fractional shares and direct charters to outsource the liability of maintenance.
Fully embracing the mobility as a service model.
Then we explored the future of the last mile, with the regulatory race to certify eVTOLs to cure urban gridlock, and the massive infrastructural bottleneck of sustainable aviation fuel.
As the industry faces the new mandatory cost of carbon.
And finally, we saw how the brands themselves are selected not for their logos, but as highly specific tools to execute highly specific geographic missions. It is the ultimate utility vehicle for the ultra-wealthy.
Well summarized.
So as we sign off, I want to ask you, the listener, to reflect on your own week. Look back over the last 7 days.
Just think about the friction.
Right. Tally up the hours you spent waiting on someone else's schedule, waiting for a train, sitting in gridlock traffic, standing in a security line. Calculate the physical weight of that lost time.
And as you calculate the cost of that friction in your own life, I will leave you with one final, broader consideration to mull over.
What's that?
We have spent this entire deep dive establishing that the absolute pinnacle of wealth is the ability to buy your way out of shared public infrastructure.
Right.
Whether that means bypassing the commercial airline terminal today in a fractional Gulf Stream or bypassing the metropolitan traffic jam tomorrow in an electric air taxi.
Okay.
But if the individuals and corporations with the most capital, the most influence, and the highest tax brackets simply opt out of the public system entirely, what happens to the quality of the infrastructure left behind for the other 99%?
Wow.
Are we witnessing the subtle creation of a two-tiered system of time itself?
A two-tiered system of time. That is a heavy, necessary thought to end on. Thank you for navigating this complex data with us today. This has been your custom deep dive into the invisible mechanics of the time economy. Until next time.